Sometimes, miracles wear the face of someone society ignores. When a billionaire walks in and sees his maid's daughter feeding his disabled son, what happens next will leave you speechless. Loudly crying, watch till the end for the twist that will melt your heart and make you believe in destiny again. Dizzy, subscribe now for more heart-touching stories like this, only on Scape. Red heart sparkles. It was one of those cold, empty mornings when silence screamed louder than words in the mansion of billionaire Alexander Voss, a man whose wealth could buy anything except peace. His life, polished in gold yet hollow inside, was a museum of loneliness. His only son, Ethan, once the brightest smile of his world, had been left disabled after a tragic car accident that also took his beloved wife Elena 3 years ago. Since then, Alexander lived like a ghost wearing a suit, speaking to no one, trusting no one, his heart frozen behind marble walls of grief. His house was managed by a loyal maid, Maria, a widow who had served him for over a decade. She was humble, devoted, and always spoke softly, afraid to disturb the storm that lived inside her employer's chest. She had a daughter, Lila, a shy 17-year-old girl who would sometimes visit her mother after school, quiet and curious, her eyes reflecting a soul too kind for this cruel world. One fateful morning, Alexander returned home earlier than usual from a business trip, unannounced. The sun was just beginning to rise, its pale light crawling across the marble floor of his grand foyer. His footsteps echoed through the mansion like forgotten memories. As he walked past the long corridor leading to Ethan's room, he heard something that stopped him in his tracks. A soft humming, a gentle lullaby, one he hadn't heard since his wife used to sing it to Ethan before bedtime. The sound came from Ethan's room. His heart, which had long forgotten how to beat with emotion, skipped. Carefully, he pushed the door open just an inch, and what he saw through that small gap made his eyes sting with tears he didn't know he still had. There, beside Ethan's bed, sat Lila, the maid's daughter. Her hair was tied loosely, a few strands falling over her face, and in her hands, she held a spoon, feeding Ethan with patience and tenderness. Ethan, who hadn't smiled or responded to anyone in months, was smiling, actually smiling, and his tiny hand was clutching hers. She was speaking to him softly, telling him stories about stars, about how each one was a wish waiting to be found. Alexander stood frozen, watching in disbelief. For years, he had hired the best doctors, therapists, and specialists to help his son recover, spending millions, but none had managed to draw a single smile from Ethan. Yet this simple girl, with nothing but love in her eyes, had done what money couldn't. When Lila noticed Alexander standing there, she gasped and stood up quickly, spilling the spoon, trembling. "Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean," she stammered, but Alexander raised his hand, silencing her. He walked toward the bed slowly, his gaze shifting from her to Ethan. He smiled, he whispered, almost to himself, as his fingers brushed his son's hair. Ethan's eyes lit up, and he pointed toward Lila. Lila, he mumbled weakly. It was the first word he had spoken in months. Alexander felt his throat tighten, tears threatening to spill. He looked at Lila, his voice rough yet trembling. "What did you do to my son?" he asked, not in anger but in awe. Lila shook her head quickly. "Nothing, sir. I just talked to him. I told him stories. He looked sad, so I thought maybe he needed a friend." That moment changed everything. Alexander, curious and desperate, asked Lila to stay with Ethan for a few hours daily after school. She hesitated, afraid her mother might lose her job, but Maria was speechless when Alexander personally requested it. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began to change. He laughed, tried to move his hands more, even whispered new words. Lila brought color back into the boy's world, drawing with him, singing lullabies, and telling him stories about courage and hope. For the first time in years, the mansion felt alive again. Alexander often stood quietly by the doorway, unseen, watching them with a mix of wonder and guilt. He realized how much he had buried himself in grief and forgotten how to love the son his wife had left behind. But behind those innocent interactions, something deeper was unfolding, a mystery that neither Lila nor Alexander saw coming. One evening, while Lila and Ethan were painting, Alexander noticed a familiar bracelet on Lila's wrist. It was silver, with a small heart-shaped charm engraved with the initials EV, Elena Voss. His late wife's bracelet. His blood ran cold. "Where did you get that?" he asked sharply, startling her. Lila froze, staring at the bracelet as if seeing it for the first time. My mom gave it to me. She said it was from a kind lady who helped her a long time ago." Alexander's mind raced. Could it be? He rushed to Maria, his voice shaking. "That bracelet, where did it come from?" Maria lowered her gaze, her hands trembling. "Sir, please, I didn't want to cause trouble. Years ago, when you and Madame Elena came to the orphanage for charity, she met my daughter. Lila was sick, weak, and Madame Elena, she helped pay for her surgery. She gave her that bracelet as a blessing. I wanted to tell you, but after Madame's death, I thought you'd forgotten." The realization hit Alexander like a wave. His wife had once saved the very girl who was now saving their son. It felt like fate had written a circle of miracles that were now unfolding before his eyes. The next morning, Alexander invited Lila and Maria for breakfast, a first in years. The dining hall, once silent, echoed with soft laughter as Lila talked about her dreams of becoming a teacher for special children. Alexander, moved by her humility, decided to sponsor her education secretly. But life, unpredictable as ever, had another storm waiting. One evening, as Alexander returned from a meeting, he found chaos in the mansion. Ethan's wheelchair was overturned near the garden, and Maria was screaming. Lila had gone missing. Security footage revealed a black van that had entered the premises disguised as a delivery vehicle. Alexander's world shattered. He called the police, used his vast resources, and within hours, the truth unfolded. The kidnappers were the same people who had caused the car accident 3 years ago, the one that killed Elena and left Ethan disabled. They were after Alexander's fortune, and when they discovered the girl who had grown close to the billionaire's son, they saw an opportunity for ransom. Desperation turned Alexander into a man possessed. He used every connection, every ounce of power, and even offered his entire wealth if it meant Lila's safety. For 2 sleepless nights, he searched relentlessly. Finally, a lead came, a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. When police stormed the place, they found Lila unconscious, tied up, but alive. Alexander, seeing her fragile body, knelt beside her and wept like a child. When she opened her eyes and whispered, "Is Ethan okay?" his heart broke completely. Days later, Lila recovered in the hospital, and Ethan refused to eat until she came back. When she returned, the reunion between them melted every soul who saw it. Ethan lifted his trembling hand and touched her cheek, whispering, "My angel." Even Alexander couldn't hold back his tears. He realized then that Lila wasn't just a girl who had helped his son, she was the miracle his late wife had left behind. She was the unfinished chapter of his family's story. As months passed, Lila continued to visit, but one day she hesitated. "Sir, I think it's time I go," she said softly. "I've been accepted into a teaching program in another city." Alexander felt an ache he hadn't expected. "You've changed our lives, Lila. You're part of this family," he said, his voice breaking. But she smiled. "You gave me more than I ever dreamed of. Now I want to do the same for others like Ethan." He couldn't argue. On her last day, Ethan cried and clung to her, whispering, "Don't go." She hugged him and promised, "I'll always be with you, in every story, in every smile." Years later, Alexander stood on a stage at the grand opening of the Elena and Lila Foundation for Disabled Children, named after the 2 women who had taught him the true meaning of love and healing. Lila, now a grown woman and teacher, stood beside him, radiant with pride. Ethan, stronger and happier than ever, presented her with a framed photo of the 3 of them, a father, a son, and the girl who had changed their lives forever. The crowd applauded, tears glimmering in their eyes. As the ceremony ended, Alexander looked up at the sky, whispering to his late wife, "You sent her to us, didn't you?" A gentle breeze brushed his face, like an answer from heaven. He smiled, his heart finally at peace. The mansion that was once filled with silence now echoed with laughter, children's voices, and the melody of love reborn. And in the quiet corner of the garden, where Ethan had once fallen, now bloomed a small white rose bush, planted by Lila the day she left, a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can grow into a miracle that lasts forever. So remember this: sometimes, destiny hides in the hands that feed, the smiles that heal, and the souls that love without expecting anything in return. Because miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes, they walk among us, wearing a maid's daughter's smile.